Welcome to Focus 54, your real weekly guidance to real African news. My name is Jeffrey Mrimbechi, and as always, we take a look at the topical issues that are facing in all our 54 countries within Africa. Now, today's episode, we are focusing on the Sahel region after Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger announced that their immediate decision to withdraw from the Economic Community of West African States, which is popularly known as Ecowas. So today, we will take an understanding on the positions and find the facts surrounding this. There is a lot of military influence, and we'll be having a political analyst who's also a lecturer from the University of Zimbabwe to help us decipher what exactly is going on in the region. But we start off by talking about what's happening in Africa, and we start off in Senegal, within that same region, where Western African bloc asks Senegal to reverse its presidential election delay that caused an uproar. Now, the West Africa's bloc, Ecowas, said that Senegal should hold the presidential election this month as scheduled, and instead of delaying it by 10 months, as the United Nations Human Rights Office expressed concern about unprecedented decision in one of Africa's most stable democracies. So President Macky Sall had postponed it from the 25th of February, and that story is still unfolding, and there is debate about that, and the opposition leaders and candidates rejected the decision, calling it a coup. Still, within Africa, we turn to Sudan, where the United Nations Commission of Refugees, Filippo Grandi, embarked on a poignant journey through Sudan, where he met with families torn apart by devastating conflicts ravaging the nation. And as you can clearly see, that the ECOWAS region has a lot of its problems. Maybe this is one of the reasons why these three countries left, and we'll be diving deeper in that as we get into our second segment. But quite closer to home are some very sad news in Namibia, where the Namibia's President Hage Geingob passed away as a result of battle with a long illness. Now, tributes flooded from African countries for the former president who passed away earlier on Sunday, and he was widely recognized for his unwavering commitment to realizing the fundamental right to access to clean water and proper sanitation, one of the many SDGs within the world. And his name will be written in history, and history books will talk about his contribution to Africa. And finally, during the UN 2023 Water Conference, the late president of Namibia received a global recognition through the Global President Water Changemakers Award for his leadership in establishing a high-level panel of water investment for Africa. That wraps up the first segment of Focus 54. Join us in the second segment, where we go to the Sahel region and talk about what's happening with these three countries. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Focus 54, and welcome to the second segment, where we have our guests in studio. Today we have Dr. Matarusa, who's back on the show, and he is a University of Zimbabwe lecturer on political science and a whole lot more. I'd like to also mention that he is quite an expert on international relations. Doc, welcome back to Focus 54.
Thank you. It's great to be here. The discussions are always insightful.
Yes, indeed. And I am reliably told that you're inspiring a lot of students to get writing and to deepen their thoughts and understanding on African political matters. Now, speaking of which, Niger, Burkina Faso, as well as Mali have recently announced that they wanted nothing to do with the sub-regional bloc, ECOWAS. Now, further deepening tensions between the bloc and the countries currently led by military transitional governments, who've also indicated that they want to have civil rule in the next few moments to come. What is the political climate like in that region?
I think the climate generally is anticipatory. People are looking at a movement. You know, it's an African state that's trying to redefine itself, like most of Africa. You know, we are looking at French history being unraveled. So these people are looking at independence and they are happy. You know, unlike British colonies, where most of the countries actually acquired independence. In many French colonies, independence was never acquired. But what happened is that, except for Algeria and Indochina, countries like Vietnam, you know, where wars were actually fought. In these other countries, war was never fought. So what they are experiencing right now is what they should have experienced in the 1970s. So it's euphoric, people are happy, you know, it's anticipatory, but they have a great work ahead of them. Yeah.
Is it so intense that they've even done away with French as an official language in their schools to move directly into English? Now, these military leaders have said and promised that they're going to have elections coming up soon and civilian rule. Is this practical, possible, and how will that go?
Like I said, it's a lot of work still ahead. You know, it's a vision, but the history of coups, you know, and post-independence is that always the former colonizer tries to meddle and be involved. So they will still have to be on guard. So they have a lot of work ahead. But I liked what you spoke about when you said that doing away with French. You know, but they've not just done away with French. They are doing away with the franc zone, which is French money, like the US dollar from France. They are also doing away with taxes, paying colonial taxes to France. So they are doing away with a lot of things.
So in 2023, 2022, these three countries and some parts of the Sahel region were actually paying taxes to France.
Actually, in Africa, it's 14 African countries.
Out of the 54?
Still, yes, that still pay the tax to France. So in some of these taxes date back to 1965, 1975, you know. So it's really, when I look at it, there was no way of doing this thing. It had to be done through this kind of way. It's a painful way. Liberation is painful. But like I still insist, it's one thing to talk about revolution. It's another thing to then leave the revolution. So they have work to do. Yeah.
So the likes of Ibrahim Traoré are pretty much the new age Thomas Sankara's taking them to the promised land. Now let's talk about sanctions. Obviously, we've seen that Burkina Faso has shown that they have positive relations with the likes of Russia and other powers at that level. Is this region and are these countries going to be protected from the effects of illegally imposed sanctions, because they might come through at any point in time?
Yeah, so already there are sanctions on the countries, and these sanctions are likely to impact freedom of movement of people, freedom of goods, freedom of you know, the movement of services. Things like that are likely to be impacted, and they've already been impacted. But the geopolitics that you're mentioning, Russia, the presence of the French, the presence of the Americans, everyone wants to have a cake. But a cake of what? You know, it's a cake. It's a cake. You know, a cake at the cake of uranium, at the cake of oil, which is this region. By the way, the Sahel region is the region that is at the edge of the Sahara Desert.
Yes.
And it's so rich in these particular minerals. And as you see, Europe is having an energy crisis, and uranium and oil are definitely at the center.
So
of
uranium fueling up nuclear power stations and things like that. Now, still on that, Ecowas had a role, a security function that pretty much in principle protected members of Ecowas. With these three coming out and a lot of volatility in terms of security and wars in that region, how are these three going to survive? I would like to call them the renegade three.
Yeah, you see, Ecowas was founded in 1975, right in the thick of colonization, and it has struggled to exist. But what we are seeing, you know, what we are calling cracks, actually, I think progress. It's progress. So they are not really renegades. Yes, they are dissenters in terms of them accepting the family kind of colonization that France had imposed on West Africa. So generally, when I look at everything, and I'm seeing this thing, the Thomas Sankara mantle that you mentioned, you know, Thomas Sankara in 1987 declared independence from France and renamed Upper Volta to Burkina Faso, meaning land of the upright. You know, so they're talking about things like corruption, which had become endemic, facilitated by the French and the colonial system.
So that
altogether.
divide and rule that you mentioned.
Yes, there is definitely that divide and rule, but there's also a serious issue of terrorism. You find when you talk about terrorism since 2017, you find 50% of the deaths were actually happening in Africa, but 35% of the deaths were happening in the Sahel region. So you find most Ecowas countries like Nigeria really have legitimate concerns about what this means for groups like Boko Haram and other terrorist networks within the region. So that's why I'm saying these three countries still have a lot of work in terms of ensuring peace and ensuring that non-state actors who are terrorists in nature, you know, are prohibited. Yeah.
What are the telltale signs of instability or unhappiness within a nation is when people start moving, the issue of immigration? Yeah. Understand that 5 million citizens of these countries found their way in the countries such as Cote d'Ivoire, Togo, Ghana, and the Republic of Benin. Are they not concerned? Will they not have concerns about immigration issues as a result of this move, this bold move by these three countries?
Yeah, definitely. When people move, you create situations, humanitarian situations of refugees. But if you look at the Sahel region, Libya included, immigration has been a challenge for a long time. You know, Mauritania, which used to be a member of ECOWAS, also moved away. So you find most of the countries in the Sahel, you have actually had an immigration crisis moving into Europe. So what you might actually witness is more of that. Yeah. But I'm sure the governments that have taken over, with the support of the international community, their friends, they'll get everything through. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Doctor. Let's take a short break, and when we come back, we'll discuss the positives of ECOWAS and the way forward and deepen on these issues. Stay tuned to Focus 54. Welcome back to the third and final segment of Focus 54, and I am joined by Dr. Mataruse, who is from the University of Zimbabwe, a lecturer in political science, master of, I'd like to say a master, or you've mastered the art of understanding international relations. That's why we have you here. We are still discussing the issue of, three major countries leaving the ECOWAS bloc. But let's discuss the bloc and what it's done for these three countries in the last 45 years. I'm sure they have to have had a couple of positives, socially and economically and politically as well.
Yeah, regional integration in Africa is very important. You know, ECOWAS is part of the 5 economic communities of the African Union, where SADC is involved, the Maghreb Union, EAC for East African Community, ECAS, etc., all those regional blocks, etc. So the countries have benefited mainly from coordination around the standardization of rules, of laws, the freedom of movement. People could move freely in the, in ECOWAS countries, etc. Those were the benefits. But when you then look at the benefits, you see still a latent critique, a latent criticism from the citizens. Most of them were saying, we don't really see a benefit from existing that. It's almost like you're having a deja vu of Brexit, where you find people in Britain were saying, our existence in the European Union, we don't really see the benefit to the locals in that. So there are these big benefits that we might tick, that the region has achieved this, but for the country itself, the people would not have achieved that much. So this is the problem that we see, apart from the very big achievements.
Well, just like anything, money plays a big role in political matters. There has been, strong allegations, some of them even evident, that foreign powers influenced ECOWAS. Is this probably one of the reasons why these three countries left? And also, with that regard, Russia came out to support Burkina Faso openly. Is that a good or a bad thing?
Yeah, you see, unfortunately, the conflict in this region dates a long time ago. You have to bring in the Rwandan genocide. You have to bring in the Central African Republic. You have to bring in Senegal. You have to bring in these many examples. So there is a history that unfortunately you can't dismiss. So when the three countries mention the foreign control or the foreign meddling of of certain countries, they are on point. It has been historical. You find presidents in Togo, presidents in Mali, the Ahmed Toure, people that were removed by foreign countries. Sometimes when they said they don't want to use the French currency, you find they were removed. They were assassinated. There were assassinations in the past. So it's really a multi-layered crisis, a multi-layered situation that we are looking at. And we need to be able to look at it from so many levels. But I think the biggest level is really the involvement of foreign actors, some that thought they would never leave. What was the policy of de Gaulle from France, of Ginger, of Chirac from France? What was
Chirac was heavily involved in this history.
Yes, and that's in the early 2000s. Yeah, so you have had a situation where things have been building up. It's been a gradual building up, and we have come to this moment where people are asking questions and are wanting answers to certain things. Are they a free country or they are colonized? You find the same question being asked in South Africa, where young South Africans are also asking the same question.
How are we independent, but we own nothing?
Yes. Are we a free country or we are still, oppressed? And you find countries like Zimbabwe, we were almost in that situation for a long time because owing to the Lancaster House 10-year clause, we waited until 1990 to start to really talk about the land reform, etc. Because of that clause. But when we then took the land, there was this thing. So it's the same thing that's happening now. Many, many years later, Ecowas is standing up and saying,
emancipation comes at a cost.
It has to come at a cost. Any movement, even in your personal life, if you are considering migrating from one career into another, from one workplace into another, it's always painful. They're the bad things of something that's good. Yes.
And then finally, before I do let you go, Doc, I know in public relations and mass communication, it's great to say we're coming from military rule into civilian rule, but judging from the last line of defense, which is the military, and the instability of that region, can we practically and pragmatically say that they can do away with the influence of the military?
Yeah, so the military generally, you are not supposed to do away with the influence of the military. You look at the U.S. political economy, U.S. politics in general, almost everyone has been involved somewhere, because what military service does is teaches you values in terms of how to protect the country. And you sacrifice a life of service, generally. So what we want to see probably from that side is the ability to then transition from the uniform and into civilian government.
So the same way we saw, President Kagame.
Yes.
We saw him as a military man, and now he's a man in a suit.
Yes.
As a diplomat.
Yes, yes. And remember, Kagame was hated by the French when they took over because of their anti-colonial stance.
One of the first thing he did was do away with the French language.
Yes.
Okay.
So one of the key things that has to happen now is an issue of demobilization. Violence must only be found with the state. You must not find violence being held by other people elsewhere, but by the state only. So that's the task ahead. How do you demobilize, and how do you integrate these other groups into the conventional army? Because there are also many groups apart from the actual army. Yeah, there are many groups that have to be silenced and stopped. Yeah.
Wow. You know what, Doc? I would love to get deeper into this, but before we let you go, where can people find you online? I understand that you're very busy with the University of Zimbabwe, but where can people find you online to research deeper and get in touch with you?
My Facebook, my LinkedIn, my Twitter, I'm also active. But also at the University of Zimbabwe, we run a very vibrant international relations program where we hold foreign policy discussions of this kind. And I think it allows us also to really look and interface and exchange ideas about these kind of discourses. Remember, Zimbabwe's foreign policy is actually very key to the national transformation currently in the NDS1. Yeah, so it's something we are taking seriously as well.
And that concludes the Focus 54. And please, we'll keep a close eye on the Sahel region as new news and new updates will be coming through every single week. Do stay tuned. And if you want to watch a recap of this show, go on our Facebook page. That is ZBC News Online. I am Jeffrey Murimbechi.